Hello and welcome to this new video. So this video was intended to be a live stream, but due to a technical issue, I was not able to do it live. So I decided to record and upload it for you. So the main purpose of this video or of this new session is to show you how to implement Spring Security under Spring Boot version 2.7.0 or greater than that, because so many of you have been asking for this configuration because since the migration or since the new versions of Spring Boot, the old configuration or the old way that I showed you before how to configure Spring Security is now deprecated. So I will show you in this tutorial how to implement or how to migrate, if you have already something implemented, how to migrate to this new Spring Security configuration. So before starting, I would like to ask you to hit the like button just to satisfy the YouTube algorithm, and then comment out what you want to see or what you want to learn in the next videos. So let's get started. So here I created a project and I set up few things. So here we have a model or an entity user. I also created the repository for that. And I also created a user service and one controller. So this is like a basic API. And let's go ahead and check the user model. So for the user, here we see that we have an entity, and this one is just I added the annotation table because PostgreSQL of the user, the name user or the entity user is already reserved with if you are using the PostgreSQL database. So I created a simple user containing only three attributes: ID, email, and password. And like I have a recommendation for you when you are working with Spring Boot and you want to implement or work to secure your API using Spring Security, go ahead and always implement the user details. And the user details is an interface from Spring Security Core Credentials user details. So this user details is an interface that contains few methods, and these methods are they are basically getters, and they are used by Spring to run the security when you implement it or when you activate Spring Security on your API level. So if you override this interface, it will ask you to override few methods, which are these methods. And here the first one is to get the authorities, and the authorities, like for this case or like for this test case, I'm just returning a single list of new simple granted authorities with a role user. So if you have multiple roles, just go ahead and return the correct value. Also for the get password, I'm just returning my password, and we have here the username, like the get username. So for me or for my case, username is the email. And here, like we have this four get methods. The first one is account non-expired. Here you have to pay attention, it's non-expired. So when we return true means the account is not expired. Same for the account non-blocked and credentials non-expired. And we also have here the last one, if the user is enabled or not. So in case, for example, you want to manage or you want your user to be like to enable the user when, for example, when he first creates the account, you want to set it to disabled and then an admin or something like that, or like he needs to click on verification email and so on to enable the user. So this is what you need to use. Okay, so this is the first one. Second, it's a user repository. So it's a simple interface extending the GPA repository. And here we are passing the parameters, as you know, for the user and Antigro, which is the ID type. And I also created or added a new method, which will return a user. And this method is find by email, just to fetch the user by its email. Then I created a user service or like a service class And here I'm also using the Lombok annotations. So here I have the repository and the password encoder. And as you can see here, like I have two simple methods. The first one is to save the user, and the second one is just to get all the users. And here I'm just returning an empty list because I'm like only this one that interests me. So this is the user service. The next one is the authentication controller, which is a controller. I will explain it later on, or like you already know this, but and also if you have already an application, all you can do or all you need to do is to implement the authentication controller, or like the way you want to implement your authentication. So I suggest, or like I suppose that you already have this set up, but I will just come back and explain it later quickly. So this is the authentication controller, which contains two endpoints, one for the register and the second one for the authenticate. And the register will return just a string, which is the token, and the authentication also like will try to authenticate the user, and then if the user is authenticated, we will try to return a GWT, or like a token. Also, so this is mainly about the application, and also like I have two config files here. This one is the GWT utils. So I guess all of you know, if you already if you are following my courses or my tutorials on YouTube and Udemy, so I guess, or I suppose you know this one. And also if you just search in GitHub GWT utils for Java, you will find it. So, and like the main goal of this class is to generate and to check if a token is valid or not. So, like because this tutorial is mainly how to migrate or to implement Spring Security using the recent version, so that's why I will not go into all the details and explain all the things, because I will suppose that you know it. Otherwise, just let me know and I will make a new video about this. And here we have a GWT filter, or a filter. It's a once per request filter, which has a role, or like what it will do is mainly to validate a token. Like when we get a request, this one will be executed first, and then we will try to get the authorization header, the email GWT, and then we will check if we have a bearer token. So then we will try first. We will get the token by substring, doing a substring of the beer space, and then we take the rest, which is our GWT, and then we will extract the user email using the GWT or the JWT utils class. And then we will check if we have the user email, and also if the security context dot get authentication is null, meaning that the user is not connected. So what we do, we get the user details, or the user from the database. And then what we do, we check if the token is valid for this specific user. If it's the case, so we need to update the security context and set the authentication with this authenticated user. And last, what we will do is we will also call the chain dot do filter to continue executing all the filter chain. So this is mainly about the setup, or what we have already for our project. So I will go ahead and close all the tabs. But before that, I will just tell you a little bit about the pom.xml. So it's a simple Spring Boot project, which is, for my case, it's under Java 17. And here I have the data GPA security web, and also I'm using a PostgreSQL as a database. I'm also using Lombok for the annotations. And finally, for the GWT, the class, the GWT utils, I'm using, or you need also to include this dependency, which is called ggwt from the package io.json web token. And the recent version is the 091. So, okay. Now, what we need to do here, in case to make or to migrate the Spring security. So before, what we here, I will just create a class, security config. So before, what we used to do is implement or extends security is extending this class, which is Web Security Configurer Adapter. And as we can see, like this is the main reason of creating this tutorial, is to show how to migrate to this one, because after the Spring version 3, this one will be removed. So this is the Spring Security Configurer Adapter, and here it says that it's deprecated. And what we used to do before is that we need to override few configure methods. And now all we need to do is this, like we no longer need to extend this Web Security Configurer Adapter. So first, what we need to do is we need to add the annotation enable web security. And then I will will include the required args constructor from Lombok to be able to automatically inject the dependencies. So here, what I will create first is I will create a private user details service, which is my interface. And this one is my user details service. Or I will just call it user service as you want. And also I will inject this one also needs to be final, and I will also inject my Gwt filter. So after declaring these two variables, what we need to do, or like the first thing that we need to do, is we need to create a bean. And this one will be, let me just try to find an old configuration. So this is what the old configuration looks like. So what we have here, we have this class security configuration, which extends the Web Security Configurer Adapter. And what we have here, we have our first method, which is configure, and the one that takes an Authentication Manager builder as a parameter or as an input. And here what we need to specify is we want to specify the user details service and the password encoder. So this is the first one. The second one, we have also another configure method, which we need to provide, or like to specify what we want to do and what are the authorized requests and if we have a filter and so on. Also, we have one bean for the Authentication Manager and one bean for the password encoder. So first, let's start by migrating this configure method. So the replacement for this configure method is that we need to provide a bean of type security filter chain. So we need to provide a bean of type security filter chain. I will just call it filter chain, and also it takes HTTP security as a parameter. You can call it maybe HTTP, like the variable. And this method, don't forget, it throws exceptions. So here what we need to do, like lately we need to do HTTP build. We need to build. And here first we need to configure our security. So here, if you want to disable the CSRF, disable, and then now we will tell Spring which requests we want to authorize. So here we need to add authorized requests, and it's a lambda expression and a request. And here what we need to do, I'll just add a semicolon here. So here what we need to do, we need to say request. Sorry, it's a typo here. So request dot ain't matchers. So here we can provide all the matchers that we want to authorize. So for example, I will just make an empty one, and then I will extend it. So here we will tell Spring that for this one, I want to permit all this and matchers. Like here, for example, let me give you an example. Here, if you have /something/auth, or for example, register, like to register or to create a new user, we don't need any permission for that. So that's why we need the permit all. And then we will tell Spring that any request should be authenticated. So here, like we tell Spring, do this and this and this, but here I want this request to be authorized, permit all, but any other request should be authenticated. But if you have other requests or like other patterns, you can you can authorize them here. And also now we need to provide the session manager, because as we see here, like we need now to provide or to tell the session what to do with the session management. So because if here it says it will throw, we need to surround it with try and catch, and let's do it. So here the session management, it will define the session creation policy. So for example, and here if you don't provide this part, then the user will be authenticated, will still authenticated during the session, even if you remove the bearer token from your request, which is like a security issue that you need to take care about it. So here, like this is the first configuration. Now, as we can see here, we have this first configure method, and for this one we are telling Spring which user details to use and what is our password encoder. So in order to migrate this one, what we need to do is first we need to create a new bean of type authentication provider. I will just call it authentication provider, and it takes nothing as parameter. And for this one, it will take a DAO authentication provider, new DAO authentication provider. So this one will, as you can see here, for the authentication provider, I can tell it set user details service. And for me, it's user details service. And also I can tell the authentication provider which password encoder I'm using. And here, like I need my password encoder bean. So this is a method. I will just create a method out of this. And this is a password encoder. And now I can transform this to a bean. And I will, this should be public, of course. And I should simply use or return a bcrypt password encoder. So now I told Spring which is or what is my authentication or my user details service and the password encoder. Now I just need to return the authentication provider. But this is not over, because here in the HTTP configuration or in the filter chain configuration, I need to tell Spring that I'm using a specific authentication provider. So here I can add authentication provider, and I can rely on my bean I just created. So this is the authentication provider, and this now we migrated this part. So what we still need to do, we need to do now to migrate, or like to see how we can provide the authentication manager. And the authentication manager is the one we need here for the controller, for example, to authenticate user. So here we need the bean of type authentication manager. So let's create this one. I will create a bean public authentication manager. I will call it authentication manager, and it takes as a parameter authentication configuration. I will just call it config, and here it also throws, this method also throws exception. And we simply need, let me make it a bit bigger, and we simply need to do return config.get authentication manager. So like this, we have our authentication manager bean. So now we still need to tell Spring or to provide this one. So this one doesn't change. All we can do here dot add filter before, and they can just tell Spring to use this Gwt filter before username password authentication filter. So dot class, of course. So here, meaning that before executing this user password authentication filter, I want you to execute my Gwt filter. So before doing anything or before going to authenticate the user, I want to check if the user has a valid Gwt token or not. So did I forget anything else? I guess not. So in this way, we saw, or like I just showed you how to implement how to implement the security use in Spring 2.7.0 or greater. So this is the way, and now if you execute your application, you will have everything working fine. So I just want to go back to the controller and tell you what we can do. So here what we have the user service, the Gwt utils, the authentication manager, and our user repository. So here we have the register method. What it will do, it will simply call the Gwt utils generate token, and then before calling this one, I will just persist my my user details. So let me format a bit the code. So okay, so now I guess it's more readable. So now, like, we can go to the save method. What we do is to encode the password and then just make a simple call to our user repository and persist the user. And the authenticate, it's also one simple method. What it does first, when we get the user request, and here just as a reminder, the user, we have only 3 attributes: ID, email, and password. And here what we do is we need to authenticate, and to authenticate, all we need to do to call the authentication manager.authenticate method, and we need to pass a username password authentication token as a parameter. And if the user is authenticated, we will pass or we will reach this part. If not, this method will throw an exception. Okay. So, and this one will throw a bad credentials exceptions, by the way. And then next what we will do, we will just fetch the user from our database using the find by email method, and then we will generate a token, and simply we will return this one. Or, like, just to make it simple, you can do this and remove this line. All right, so yeah, this is all about how to migrate to the Spring, or to the new implementation of Spring Security. So if this is fine and if this is clear for all of you, so which is good. Otherwise, just let me know and I will try to make a full video or a full tutorial how to implement security from scratch. And also I will just go through all these services, repositories, models, and so on. Also this Gwt filter, and I will let you know how to implement this one. So I hope you like this video, guys. Just one last question, or like one last favor, just hit the like button just to satisfy the YouTube algorithm, and see you in the next one.